Nick, ready. Present. Fire. Prime and load.
My name is Logan, joined here by Veronica, Patrick, Andrew, and Tobias. And shortly he will be demonstrating this weapon for all of you. But before we do that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the weapon itself, how it was used in the 18th century and here at Michilimackinac. So what we have here is a light bronze, 6-pound field piece that describes different aspects of this weapon. Light bronze meaning is made out of bronze, a lot lighter than your typical iron cannon. This weighs a little over 500 pounds on itself, while your iron cannons weigh about 800 pounds. Being lighter, it can be put on what you see here, a field piece. Being on this field piece, it is highly mobile. It can be transported across this battlefield quite rapidly. Now, with this weapon, it's pretty light. It also has a good range to it. This can launch a 6-pound cannonball up to a mile. If you look back at the Mackinac bridge behind you, you see where the cables come down and into that big cement block. That's about a mile from us. Now that is maximum range. You can launch a cannonball that far, but you're probably not going to hit what you're aiming for. A more accurate range is about half a mile. You can hit a target about the size of that blockhouse up there. So, if your enemy doesn't get the hint and keeps coming closer, at about 400 yards, you can load down a shot. You take a tin can packed full of musket balls and turn this gun right here into a big shotgun that will clear out everything and everyone within 300 to 400 yards. So it's highly mobile. It's a very deadly weapon, but here at Michilimackinac, this is never used as a weapon. Even during the height of the American Revolution, this is never fired at anybody. It's never fired in any attack, but it is still being used. This is one out of 11 pieces of artillery, and they didn't know they weren't going to get attacked. They needed to be ready if they were attacked, so they are still practicing with these weapons. Practicing them pretty regularly, making sure their skills are all tuned in if they get attacked. The second reason they're firing off this weapon is for salute rounds. Say you can fire this off for welcoming supply canoes that are coming in, or even local Native American leaders that are coming in for negotiations. A salute round is where you just black powder, no cannonball, and fire it off in celebration. For those reasons, they will use it for holidays as well. Like the 4th of July, June, King George's birthday. This is a British sport, but no hard feelings. We would rather fire this for you rather than at you. But speaking of firing, why don't we get this gun ready to go? With the first command of prepare for action, this is where they take the tools and the ammunition crates off the gun. You want the ammunition crate is holding all the black powder and munitions, and you want those at as far away from the muzzle as you can get it. But because we're firing a salute round, no cannonball, there won't be much recoil to it. So at this distance, it's pretty safe. We're also taking off the tools and cover that will help us load this weapon. With that all set, I can tell them to man out the piece. This is where everyone takes their assigned position on the gun, and they are ready to wait for their orders. With them set in place, I can tell them to take care. This would essentially be a attention command. It's basically stand up straight, shoulders back, await further orders. With that in place, I can tell Tobias to hang tight. This is where he takes his thumb, puts it over the touch hole in the back of the gun, preventing any airflow coming through the back. With that in place, I can tell Andrew to, on Veronica, search, peace. This is where she sends down the worm down the gun to get out any debris that's inside the barrel. Some wadding, the bird's nest, the water gun. We want something down there when we fire this weapon off. With that in place, I can tell Andrew to advance, lunge. Say we were firing this gun in quick succession. Well, you might have some burning embers down there from the last shot. You don't want those down there. If you're loading the next charge, that could ignite the charge, sending the ramrod along with Andrew's fingers out into the lake. We don't want that, so we'll extinguish those embers with the command of sponge beast. Now with Tobias covering up the touch hole in the back of the gun, this is preventing any airflow from getting out the back. It also creates a vacuum. You might have heard that loud thump. That is that vacuum collapsing. So if the water did not extinguish those embers, that vacuum should as well. It is now 6 to load and time for me to do some work. Handle cartridge. I'll come over and get a glove for safety. And open up our ammunition box. See what we got here. So historically, this would have been a pound and a half of black powder in a flannel bag got tied directly to the cannonball, all loaded down in one go. Now with this salute round, we don't have flannel, we have tin foil. Historically inaccurate tin foil, but nice and safe tin foil, and about 12 ounces of black powder. I'll bring this to the front of the gun, hand it off to Veronica, and tell her to load. She will insert that charge into the muzzle of the gun. With that in place, I can tell Andrew to take his other end of the tool and tell him to round down cartridge, and he will seat that charge right underneath Tobias's fingers. With that in place, I can tell him to grind. This is where he takes a long brass needle. The reason it's brass is because it doesn't spark. So when you're piercing that flannel bag, you're not getting any spark, and it is a lot safer. Next, after he has fused that bag, he will insert the fuse. Historically, it would have been a thin tube packed full of gunpowder, making basically a gunpowder trail from the charge to the outside. And with that in place, we are basically ready to go. Say we were firing at a target, the next command will be to take aim. That long spike, the tail spike in the back of the gun, will be lifted up and moved left or right, and the corkscrew where Tobias is working right now can be adjusted for elevation. But we are not firing a live round, it's just a blank, so we don't need to go through that process. Now, the gun is all ready to go and ready to fire. But I do have a couple warnings. The first one is this is a cannon. It can be quite loud. So when I give the command make ready, I highly recommend covering your ears. So at this point, we have 2 more commands to go. And those 2 commands are make ready, fire! God save the king!
Welcome everybody, I see we've got some friends over here too. You are joining us for our last program of the day. This is our musket firing demonstration. Thank you so much for coming on out to learn with us. My name is Veronica and this is Tobin. And we are 2 of the military interpreters here at Michilimackinac. That means we're dressed like soldiers from the 18th century. Actually, soldiers that would have been living and working here during the era of the American Revolution. They are from the 8th Regiment of Foot. And we know that these soldiers, just like others all around the world in the British Empire during the 18th century, had a couple of different jobs to do. And if there's one thing I want you to walk away with after the end of this demonstration, it's that soldiers had to train really hard to do their job. Every day, part of a Michilimackinac soldier's life would involve them coming out here to the parade ground and participating in what's called drill. Drill is a really great way to learn skills, especially ones that you have to call up almost immediately without thinking much about them. And for soldiers, they would be learning the building blocks of what goes into a soldier's overall experience. So let's just take a poll. How many of you have ever done a drill before? Raise your hand. Yeah. The drill, maybe a fire drill, maybe a bad weather drill, something like that. Also, how many of you have ever learned to play a musical instrument? Lots of us. Excellent. How many of you have ever learned how to write cursive? Yeah. So even skills that don't have to do with athletic things or military life can still be learned through repetition of those building blocks. With learning an instrument, it might be learning a scale. With learning or something like that. With soldiers, some of the things they'd be learning at drill would be how to stand like a soldier, how to use the technology of their era of warfare, which would be muskets like this, and also how to march and be a soldier in large numbers. If you've ever seen a movie that talks about the American Revolution, you've probably seen a battlefield scenario which features one long line of soldiers facing another long line of soldiers across the battlefield, and they move as one and they fire as one. And they do that for some very specific reasons. The type of muskets that soldiers are issued are called the short land pattern musket for infantry use. These are smoothbore, flintlock, muzzle loading 75 caliber muskets. But on the whole, not just the British military, but also lots of other European armies, and eventually the American Continental Army in the American Revolution elects to use weapons like this as their choice for warfare, because they have a very specific edge over rifles in an area, and that is reloading time. After going to drill, soldiers should be able to load and fire a gun like this in about 15 to 20 seconds. So you can get off a couple rounds in the space of a minute if it's in the hands of a really well-trained soldier. We know from members of the 8th Regiment of Foot, the area where they would be coming to practice that drill and to do those skills that would be essential to becoming a good soldier would be here. This is the parade ground. This is one of the centers of the fort of Michilimackinac. And even though we know in hindsight that this fort was never attacked during the American Revolution, the soldiers here couldn't have known that back then. So there was definitely an urgency to get really good at becoming a soldier. I mentioned that this musket is best used in big numbers, and that's part of the reason why soldiers are doing lots of drilling. They're preparing in case they ever needed to go out and form up with a larger unit of the British military. In theory, if lots of soldiers are working from the same set of directions, they should have been able to sync up and create a massive army, which would have been able to respond to those same commands they learned in drill. That's not always how it goes in practice. We know that we have artifacts left over from today, like a 1764 drill manual, that can tell us how to go through the same steps that British soldiers would have been learning back then, but it's possible those instructions could be interpreted a little bit differently. So what Tobin and I are going to be demonstrating for you in a couple minutes is two different ways that soldiers would have been loading and firing this musket. The end result will be the same, but the first time we'll fire, it will just be going through the step-by-step version of loading and firing that soldiers would have practiced at drill. This is not something done for speed, it's a learning process. So you'll notice it takes quite a few steps to go from beginning to end, and we'll be pausing in between our steps to make sure that we are hitting the correct form. And the second time we fire this musket, we will be going through it as fast as we can, doing all those same motions, but in more of a scenario that would be similar to what soldiers are doing on a battlefield. So there are two of us out here today. We'll make the best use of our muskets, but generally you do want to be using these in a big group of soldiers. You can hope to hit something that you're aiming at with a musket like this at up to 100 yards. So behind you there's the water gate, and there behind me there's the land gate, and that's about a difference of 100 yards, distance of 100 yards. And if you're using a musket ball that is smaller than the caliber of your musket itself, which is what most British soldiers are doing, you can hope to hit something within the range of a human-sized target at that distance. But if you're trying to hit something that is farther out of reach than 100 yards, your bullet will still keep sailing through the air, and it will hit something and it will do some damage, but that'll be more out of your control. Whereas if you're standing in a long line of lots of other soldiers, and you're all loading and firing at the same target, you'll send out a wall of musket balls, and you'll hit your target in sort of a more blunt force fashion, and you won't need to be super precise with that. We also know that these muskets are fairly reliable. They'll work about 90% of the time if the weather is on your side. If, for example, though, it's too humid or it's rainy or it's a little bit windy like we have today, there's a chance that your musket might not work in what is called a misfire. And that's another good reason why soldiers worked in such big groups. That would put the odds on their side that most of those muskets would end up going off. So today, as Tobin and I go through this drill, and then the best version of loading and firing this musket too, just keep an eye out. We might have a historically accurate misfire, but we are also equipped with lots of tools we can use to problem solve and tell you a little bit more about how these muskets work if we need to. We can also talk about that afterwards if anyone is interested in learning that. But before we get started, you should all know that we're not firing any bullets today, but we will be firing the full historic charge of black powder, so it will be pretty loud. I would encourage you all to take care of your hearing. When you hear me give the command, make ready, that is a really good time to cover your ears or do whatever you need you all now what it would have looked like after soldiers had gone to drill for a very long time, after they had become experienced soldiers as a result of that training. They would only need to hear 1 or 2 commands to do that entire process. And remember, a well-trained British soldier should be able to do this whole process in the space of about 15 to 20 seconds. Tobin and I are still learning, so it's possible we won't be that fast, but you can time us if you like. Battlefield command is simple. Prime and load. Shoulder your fire lines. Make ready. My sleep just dropped out. Roll it out. Okay. Alright, get present. Fire! Excellent! So, Tobin's gun successfully discharged. My flint fell out.